Welcome to Nightmare Narratives, where the shadows of the highway come alive. Tonight, we bring you 3 disturbing true trucker horror stories, tales that will make you think twice before hitting the open road at night. For nearly 15 years, I've been steering big rigs across countless highways, braving all kinds of weather and navigating through both busy city streets and the loneliest of roads. Over time, I've had my share of close calls and strange encounters, but nothing compares to the nightmarish experience I had in 2017. That particular night, I was tasked with transporting a haul through the vast, seemingly endless Mojave Desert in California. My destination lay in Arizona, and though the details of what I was transporting have faded over the years, likely something like household appliances, the events of that night remain etched in my memory with unsettling clarity. The desert that night was an ocean of black, with no light but the dim glow of my truck's inadequate headlights to cut through the darkness. I had been meaning to get them fixed for weeks, maybe even months, but work had kept me too busy. Usually, I didn't pay much attention to the dim lights since there were always other cars on the road to help illuminate the way. But this time was different. The highway was eerily empty, and the lack of light became a glaring issue as I strained my eyes to keep the road in view. The darkness was oppressive, a black void that seemed to press in on me from all sides, making me feel like I was the only person left in the world. The thought of pulling over and waiting for daylight crossed my mind more than once, but I was on a tight schedule and desperately needed the money. There was no time to waste. The road ahead was mostly straight, and I convinced myself that it would be okay to keep going. After all, I had driven through worse conditions before. But as I continued on, I couldn't shake the growing unease that gnawed at the back of my mind. It was probably about an hour before sunrise when I first noticed it. A shadowy figure in the distance, standing motionless on the road ahead. My heart skipped a beat as I instinctively lifted my foot off the gas, my mind racing with possibilities. Could it be an animal? A person? Or was my tired mind playing tricks on me? As I got closer, the shape became clearer, and I realized it wasn't an animal at all. It was a car parked dead center in the middle of the road with its hazard lights blinking. I hit the brakes hard, the screech of the tires echoing in the stillness of the night as my truck came to a stop just a few feet away from the vehicle. The car was a newer model, a red Ford Fusion, its bright red paint standing out starkly against the blackness of the desert. But what caught my attention the most was the fact that the passenger door was wide open, as if someone had hastily abandoned the vehicle. I couldn't see anyone inside, but the open door sent a chill down my spine. I sat there for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Why would someone leave their car in the middle of the road like this? Had there been an accident? Was someone in trouble? The possibilities swirled in my mind, but none of them seemed to add up. Despite the growing sense of unease that gnawed at me, I knew I couldn't just leave without checking it out. What if someone needed help? If you're already hooked, don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with anyone who enjoys a good mystery. With a deep breath, I shifted the truck into reverse, backed up a bit, and then pulled over to the side of the road. The night was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. There was no wind, no rustling of leaves, just the low hum of my truck's engine and the rhythmic clicking of the car's hazard lights. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating, as I stepped out of the cab and onto the cold asphalt. I hesitated for a moment, staring at the car, before finally making my way toward it. As I approached, I couldn't help but notice how new the car looked. It was in pristine condition, with no visible damage. The paint was shiny, the tires looked brand new, and the headlights were still on, casting an eerie glow across the deserted highway. But the most unsettling thing was the passenger door, hanging wide open as if someone had just jumped out and run off into the night. I peered inside, expecting to see someone slumped over in the seat, but the car was completely empty. My heart began to race as I checked the back seat, then the trunk, but there was no one there. The car was deserted, with no sign of the driver or any passengers. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead as I looked around, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The desert stretched out for miles in every direction, an endless sea of sand and scrub, but there was nothing. No sign of life, no sound, just the oppressive silence of the night. I took a step back, my eyes darting from the car to the shadows that seemed to press in from all sides. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as a sense of dread settled in my stomach, like a lead weight. Something wasn't right. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something or someone was out there, hidden in the darkness, waiting. But for what? Despite the fear gnawing at my insides, I couldn't bring myself to leave. I had to know what was going on. I turned back to the car, determined to find some clue, some explanation for why it had been abandoned in the middle of the road. I noticed the keys were still in the ignition, but the engine was off. It was as if the driver had simply vanished into thin air, leaving everything behind. But that didn't make any sense. People don't just disappear, especially not out here in the middle of nowhere. I reached out and touched the steering wheel, half expecting it to be warm, as if someone had been sitting there just moments before. But it was cold, the leather stiff and unyielding under my fingers. I frowned, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of the situation. Had the driver been taken? Had they run off into the desert, fleeing from something or someone? The questions swirled in my mind, but no answers came. What do you think happened here? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I walked around to the back of the car, hoping to find some clue that would shed light on the mystery. Maybe there was something in the trunk that would explain what had happened. I grabbed the handle and tried to lift it, but the trunk wouldn't budge. It was locked. Frustrated, I walked back to the front of the car and grabbed the keys from the ignition. I returned to the trunk and unlocked it, but even then it refused to open. It felt as if something inside was pushing against it, holding it shut. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I opened the back door and crawled into the back seat, reaching through the small gap to access the trunk. To my surprise, the trunk finally gave way, but what I saw inside made my blood run cold. There were 3 large garbage bags, tightly packed and squished together as if someone had forced them in. A thick rope was tied around them, securing the trunk shut. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more disturbing than the last. I felt a surge of panic as I reached for one of the bags, my heart pounding in my chest. Just as my fingers brushed against the plastic, the night was shattered by a sudden deafening noise that echoed through the desert like a clap of thunder. I jumped, slamming my head against the roof of the car in shock. Pain flared up the back of my skull as I scrambled out of the car, my hands shaking with adrenaline. I didn't wait to see what had caused the noise. I bolted back to my truck, my heart racing as I fumbled with the door handle. As I climbed into the driver's seat, I heard a voice, a gruff, angry voice, yelling from somewhere in the darkness. The words were unintelligible, but the tone was unmistakable. Whoever it was, they were getting closer. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I jammed the keys into the ignition and turned them, the truck sputtering to life. I threw it into gear and slammed on the gas, the tires screeching as I sped away from the scene. As I drove down the highway, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw him, a short, stocky man with red hair, standing by the trunk of the car. He was holding a small shovel in one hand and an old hunting rifle in the other. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I saw something in his expression that I couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe, or desperation. Whatever it was enough to send a chill down my spine. The man dropped the shovel and waved his hands frantically, shouting something that I couldn't hear over the roar of the engine. But there was no way I was stopping. I pressed down harder on the gas pedal, the truck roaring as I sped down the empty highway. My heart was still racing, adrenaline coursing through my veins, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't out of danger yet. And I was right. A few minutes later, I saw them, headlights fast approaching from behind. My pulse quickened as the car drew closer, the same red Ford Fusion from before. The driver started honking wildly, swerving back and forth behind me, trying to force me off the road. Panic set in, and I gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, unsure of what to do. Was he going to ram me? Was he trying to run me off the road? I didn't have time to think. I just kept driving, praying that I could outrun him. I grabbed my phone and called the police, my voice shaking as I tried to explain what was happening. The car was right on my tail now, its headlights blinding in the rearview mirror. I could feel my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing with fear. What did he want? Why was he chasing me? The questions swirled in my mind, but there were no answers. Just the growing sense of dread that this wasn't going to end well. After what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only 15 minutes, I saw the flashing lights of a police car up ahead. Relief washed over me as I realized that help was finally on the way. But just as quickly, the Ford Fusion veered off the road, disappearing into the desert as if it had never been there. I pulled over, my hands still trembling as I waited for the officer to arrive. When the cop finally approached, I frantically recounted everything that had happened, hoping that he would go after the guy. But instead of chasing him down, the officer just took my report, assuring me that they would search the area once backup arrived. I was furious. Why wasn't he going after the guy? But there wasn't much I could do. The cops sent me on my way, promising to call if they ever had any updates. They never did. To this day, I have no idea what that guy was doing out there, or what he wanted from me. Maybe he was up to something sinister, or maybe it was something else entirely. But whatever it was, I'm just glad I got out of there in one piece. And I've never felt comfortable driving through the desert at night since. The memory of that empty car and the man with the rifle still haunts me, a reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved. Want more spine-chilling tales like this? Make sure to subscribe to Nightmare Narratives, hit the notification bell, and share this video with your friends who love a good scare.